Hello and welcome to the latest edition of SO Live. I'm Danny Flexen, delighted as always to be joined by my main man, Ayman Khan. How you doing, mate?
I'm not bad. I absolutely love our countdown music. It makes me feel like a Joshi wrestling superstar. No quits here, but to talk about the fallout for some fights, definitely. No questions of fitness, no questions of weight here. We're both unfit. We're both overweight. We're ready to talk through the weekend's action.
Yeah, just speaking for myself, I would have loved to have lost 42 pounds in a few weeks, like Liam Smith apparently did. But I don't know, I'm not as dedicated. I didn't have the carrot of a lucrative payday waiting for me. Maybe that's the key. But yeah, we are here to talk about all things Eubank Jr. Smith and also the possibility of Eubank Jr. now fighting Conor Benn, a fight that was very close previously, and all the stuff that comes along with Conor Benn, the baggage, if you like. And talking of baggage. We've got a little sub story, a little extra bit from Bomac, who was carrying something extra in his luggage on the way back to the US. At least that was the plan. I don't believe he's made it though. I think he's still here on our shores, but we'll talk about that too. But let's start with the fight itself, and we want you guys to send in your comments and questions, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. You help make this show what it is. Most interactive show on boxing YouTube, so please do. But let's just start from the start. Ayman, just sum up, concisely, if you can, what you made of Eubank Jr.'s performance against Liam Smith at the weekend.
I thought from a Eubank Jr. perspective, it was pretty much exactly what you were expecting to see Eubank Jr. produce in the first fight. Sans any, of course, notions of him not making the weight properly like it seemed to be like he did the first time around. But this is what we were expecting from him. A cool kind of, well, maybe actually just a little bit of adaptations in terms of him pumping out the jab a lot more as well. Throughout his career, we've kind of seen him be someone who was looking to break down his opponents and then look for, the knockouts. I think he was a lot more measured as well in that breaking down of Liam Smith. A performance I feel that reflected his win over Abney Yildirim many years ago. I think that sort of kind of performance we saw last week. And I think also you got to make mention as well here that a lot of that performance as well was due to Eubank acknowledging that Smith could catch him with something at any point. That being in the back of his mind led into that approach, that way of beating him and getting what is, for me, his best win of his career.
Now, we've got a poll up before I start to read some of your comments. Simply put, Eubank against Benn, if it happens next, who wins? So it'll be interesting to see how that one turns out by the end of the show. Jim says Eubank should fight Charlo, Plant, Canelo, Andrade, Janibek, Adamez, Lara, etc., etc., etc. He's 33, so I mean, let's see how long he's got left because that's a big ask. But he says, and the block caps have come out. Anybody but Benn. All right, no need to shout, Jim. Oh, Jim's back. Well, before I'd even finished reading out his first comment, he submitted another one. Boxing is supposed to be a meritocratic sport based on competition. These big money fights are not those things. Perhaps boxing needs to be classified as something other than a sport. Dell says Canelo doesn't do anything. He's guaranteed to lose. Eubank, he means, I think. Doesn't do anything for his career bar cash. Yeah, but let's not underrate cash, Dell. Let's not underrate cash. Yeah, I mean, I thought Eubank was very, very good. But the question I asked Frank Warren today, or one of the questions I asked him was, how much of the performance do we put down to Eubank himself and to Bomac being in his corner because they were only together for 4 weeks? And how much do you put down to Liam Smith crashing the weight, injuring his ankle, and just not being the Liam Smith that we're accustomed to seeing? Because Eubank was great and a much improved performance from the first time around. I mean, it couldn't have got much worse. Well, I don't know. He was all right in the first couple of rounds, wasn't he? But I think Liam Smith was just so flat. Wasn't throwing much in combination, wasn't closing the gap down. And this isn't blaming him because if the weight cut stuff is true and obviously the ankle as well, he can't be blamed for that. And he had a deadline to accept the fight. It was a huge purse for him as well. So I can understand why he did it. But it's just a struggle, isn't it? From the very start when you put yourself in that position. And I think when someone's in front of you not doing much, you can kind of, Eubank wasn't overly cautious, I didn't think, and he let the shots flow. But it's hard to tell just how good Eubank was without knowing just how bad Liam Smith was. Who else we got here? Dapper Dog says Ben too small. We will talk about the Ben stuff in a minute. Axel Schultz, again, these historic heavyweights that end up not being the real ones, unfortunately. But he says Bomac was saying he needed to squash historic gun charges before being let in the UK. He just forgot that guns are banned here. I mean, that's a pretty big omission from your memory, isn't it? Anderson De Silva says, I'm writing to my MP to ban this fight. Come on, Anderson. Who is your MP? I challenge you to tell me without Googling it. Dell says, sorry, but if it's just about cash, then how does that do anything for the true boxing fans? If it's all about cash, then you're appealing to casuals. Yeah, but I think we've seen from a lot of the crossover fights recently, as well as some of the more, famous fighters getting involved, Fury and Ngannou being an example, is that the casual fan base can support a big event. There is enough there to make it viable, to make it profitable, in fact. News and Booze, got to be a corner shop somewhere, says Conor Benn is a tiny guy who is ravished with juice. I think he means ravaged, but I'll let you off. It's a mismatch, and let's just say we don't endorse that view from News and Booze as well before we get sued. It's a mismatch. Eubank is a different weight altogether. Dell says Eubank did what he had to do against Smith. Let's not forget the first fight. The elbow played a massive factor. I mean, that's debatable. What did you think, Ayman, of Liam Smith? Like, in terms of percentages, because Eubank's always talking about, I can beat these people at 60%. What percentage of the very best Liam Smith do you think we got on Saturday night?
It's hard to really say. And I think, for me, what it was, like, I think you've acknowledged here, and I agree with you, that we saw a flat version of Liam Smith. And if what's coming out is true, that he was, Benchmark had gone and seen him a few weeks back, and he was 200 pounds plus, and you're looking to really kind of get that weight down. And he made a commitment that he'd do it, no excuses that he'd do that. And he did do that, but that led to that flat performance. And you can sort of find the reasons for it. Now, I remember speaking to or listening to a very reputable, recognized trainer in the UK who will remain nameless for now. We were speaking when this injury, the news of the injury initially got out about Liam Smith and his back. And he said to me, that's the type of injury where if you don't manage that injury, one, you can exacerbate it really easily. And two, there are also large muscles around that area as well, which you can also injure and exacerbate as well quite easily if you don't manage it. So that's a real problem, a real big problem, which, again, Liam Smith obviously said, and the team obviously said, look, it's not enough of an issue for us to not take the fight. But I believe also will account for the reason as to why Liam Smith didn't appear the full version of Liam Smith that we've seen in the past. I don't think he aged. I don't think he aged overnight. I think this is a multitude of reasons, the weight, those injuries. I think George Groves as well in commentary kind of picked up. But this isn't a fluid Liam Smith either in the ring as usual. So it's kind of interesting in the sense of the first fight we had a not real 100%, even though Chris was kind of saying he wasn't 100%, but whatever, put that to the side, of Liam Smith, of Chris Eubank Jr. Second fight, not Liam Smith. For me, I'm not pushing wholly for a trilogy fight, but a true reflection of both fighters at their positions right now in their career, having fought in the ring, hasn't actually happened yet. So from a Liam Smith perspective, they'll be pushing that third. Chris Eubank Jr. won't want it. But I think, and adding those ankles as well, which we did visibly see roll in the ring, contributing factors to a Liam Smith performance. Don't think it's anything to do with his ambition in the ring. I think he wants it. I think he wanted to beat Chris Eubank Jr. We'll have to see what it's like as well, what he's like as well, if he chooses to return to the ring.
Well, talking about seeing ankles, Axel Schultz says, how much weight do you think Bomac can lose till his trial? If Liam could shift 3 stone, hoping at least 1 stone for Bomac. Yeah, but you have to put it into pounds if you want him to truly understand it, being from the States. Jim, and I want to tackle this briefly. Jim says, people in the boxing community promote it, meaning Eubank Ben, because they also get money from it. And then he adds, even the journalists. Jim, you're absolutely right. I'm not saying that's why we promote it, but we certainly do make an income from a fight being bigger, especially if it's a fight we're covering on the channel. There's no doubt about that. And it's the same with people that work in print media or any type of media. Of course, we want boxing and every fight to be as big as it possibly can be because we benefit from that as well. But we are also boxing fans, and we wouldn't be on here telling you that, Ben Eubank's going to be a great fight or it's going to be it should be happening without UK licenses or anything like that if we didn't believe it. There is integrity on Seconds Out. I want to put that forward. But there's no point denying that journalists as a whole and media as a whole make more money the more successful a fight is. There's no doubt about that. Gail Falkenthal says, what the hell? Let Eubank and Ben load up on PEDs and have at it. Gail, I expect better from you. I know you're normally such a gentle soul. Eubank's not been suspected of taking any PEDs as far as I'm aware. So, I mean, that might be a little unfair on Eubank. Maybe just let him weigh what he wants. That might be a step in the right direction. That's something Frank Warren mentioned earlier. Well, as we move on to Eubank, Ben, just a bit of context. So, almost immediately after the Eubank-Smith fight finished and Eubank's hand was raised by the referee, Eddie Hearn tweeted, Eubank Ben absolutely massive on Twitter, or X, sorry, as it's now known. And a lot of people kind of jumped on him almost immediately saying, you know, bit opportunistic. Why are you talking about that when Ben's still got this cloud hanging over him, certainly from some people's perspectives. And that's what a lot of people are talking about. Dell says we shouldn't even be discussing Ben and Eubank until he's cleared. And there's a lot of talk, and this is something Frank Warren and I had discussed earlier. I keep saying this because I want you to go and watch the interview after this is finished, after our live's finished. But that aside, we were talking about the fact that Ben says he's cleared and he says he's vindicated. And these are quite subjective terms because, yes, he is not suspended by UKAD anymore. The suspension has been lifted, but UKAD and the British Boxing Board of Control have both appealed against that decision by the independent anti-drugs panel. So we wait to see how that all pans out. And to fight under British Boxing Board of Control jurisdiction in the UK, you need a Board of Control license, which Eubank Jr has, but Ben currently does not. He hasn't even applied for one yet, and I don't think he'll be able to until the appeal of the board and UKAD against the original decision will be heard. So there's a difference between being cleared and said you're completely innocent, which hasn't happened, and being allowed to fight, which in theory Ben is, but without a Board of Control license, it's not going to be so easy to fight on a show here in the UK. And Warren was suggesting that, you know, some of the US athletic commissions and some commissions in other countries as well may respect the board stance and not allow Ben to fight Eubank abroad either. And also, and I will let Ayman speak in a minute because I realise it's been going on for quite a long time. As Warren pointed out, if Eubank, and this was raised when the fight was originally talked about for the Middle East, if Eubank fights Ben, who doesn't have a board license in another country, he may risk his own license and that of his team because he needs their consent to box in a foreign country anyway. Gail Falkenthal says, has anyone broken it to Eubank that Gennady Golovkin no longer has any belts and hasn't fought a middleweight in 18 months? Gail, I'd imagine a lot of people have broken it to him since he made that mistake in the post-fight interview, but doesn't hurt having an extra one. Hippie Hill says, a bit off topic, but do you know anything about the whereabouts of Adam Smith? Now, I don't think it's my business to talk about exactly what's going on with Adam Smith at the moment. All I will say is that he's still very much involved as a fan in the boxing area. He's still happy and keeping in touch with what's going on. But I don't think it's a massive secret. He has some health problems that he's dealing with at the moment. It's not for me to say exactly what those are, but he is still interested in the boxing scene. I am in touch with him on a semi-regular basis, and I think we should all send our best wishes to him. Massive Coconut says, I agree, Danny, great take. I don't tend to remember everything I've talked about as we go through this, but I'm just going to say you're right. Thank you. So, Ayman, yeah, what do you think? I mean, it wasn't a surprise that Eddie Hearn started talking up Eubank Ben almost immediately after Liam Smith had stepped out of the ring. But morally, ethically, before we get onto the practicalities of it, what do you think about making that fight next?
First of all, I love Gail's energy. She's absolutely bringing it in the chat here. A big shout out to Gail Falkenthal in the chat here. No, look, you kind of nailed it pretty much succinctly in terms of the context of the whole situation, that fight going on and going ahead. Morally, there were questions which were asked about in the first place when the clause were put in for the weight in which Chris Eubank Jr. had to get down to, where he looked like an absolute shell of himself and, you know, maybe made a mistake in hindsight himself, and actually then when the fight got called off, still then choosing to weigh in at the weight he was stipulated to weigh at. For
Still
whatever
don't really
reason.
understand why he did that.
Yeah, for whatever reason he chose to do that, made a point, whatever that point is. I don't know, that he's a complete professional, whatever.
I was worried what you were going to say then.
Yeah. But look, the real crux of this situation is it's Conor Benn's situation. Chris Eubank Jr. is clear to fight. I think Chris Eubank Jr. right now, he'll have to say this for what it is, and it's always clouded about, you know, the big fights he wants and world titles and such. But when it comes down to it, what fights does he want? He wants box office, money-making fights. And I think that's what he's looking for in this stage of his career, looking to really kind of cash out on what's left of the years that he has. And it's big fights that warrant that. And big fights, you have to say, a Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn fight is a big fight. But the weights are an issue. We need to find out what that weight is, if that's been cleared as to a healthy weight for Chris Eubank Jr. And then secondly, Conor Benn's situation, not yet properly cleared. He's cleared to fight, but his situation still remains a lot of vagaries around the situation, a lot of not proper knowledge around the situation, and then just not being cleared yet to against the actual scientific point of having PEDs in his system on 2 occasions. So those are up in the air right now. Those things need to be clarified. The boxing fans need to understand really, and the journalists too, as to is he, hasn't he? What is the situation with him? This total non-lack of information doesn't help the situation for someone to look to maybe push a fight through. Doesn't sit well for a lot of people within the community and the boxing fans as well, who have smartened up to a lot of this. People kind of say, people kind of look at this, it's the hardcore fans that kind of push this narrative out. But you've got to appease the hardcore fans, first of all, because they buy the pay-per-views. But then it's also bleeding into the casual fans too, who are getting smarter and don't really want to associate themselves or buy towards a fighter who might have been using performance-enhancing substances.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you say from the commercial perspective. It's certainly a huge fight with the history between the fathers, the history between the fighters themselves. Originally scheduled fight aborted at the last minute. And then Eubank's coming off a career best performance now as a pro. How much of that's down to the trainer, we'll talk about when we get onto the Bomac section of this. And I know a lot of people are probably keen for us to get to that bit, looking at the chat. So commercially, it would be absolutely huge. But, like Frank Warren said earlier, they shouldn't fight, like the whole moral argument. And then he said, sorry, I can't stop laughing. I had to make myself stop laughing when he said it to my face, but now I can laugh because I'm here at home. And he said, I think Eubank should just fight Zach Parker. And that's no disrespect to Zach Parker. He's a really good fighter, but commercially, it's on a different planet to Eubank against Benn. It's just not going to happen, is it? So Eubank against Benn, massive commercially, but I think ethically and morally, in terms of how it presents the sport beyond the hardcore fan base as well, once it starts getting in national newspapers, national media, TV broadcasters, and so on, there's no way people are going to talk about that fight as it stands now without mentioning and probably quite heavily talking about the drug side of things. And I think if it just takes a few more months or however long for Conor Benn to sort all that stuff out with the board and with UCAD, it's probably a price worth paying. And I think from Eubank's side as well, he is coming off a career best win. He's probably more popular now than he's ever been as a boxer. He's showing himself a bit more. He showed vulnerability, which we know British people love in their boxers, as we've seen from the Frank Bruno and many others, Ricky Hatton. So does he want to tarnish that by doing what would effectively be, I don't want to say a cash grab, because obviously he can make money and there's other options out there. And there's a lot more to a Benn Eubank fight, which I think will probably be quite competitive than just money. But there are other options for Eubank, and he might not have to wait that long for Benn to, whether you think he's cleared now practically or not, in the eyes of the large amount of the public, he's probably not. So if it takes waiting for that, why not wait? Dell says, Dave Allen, I'm in the best shape of my life, done a full camp, mind you, nutrition is on track, then he pulls up on the scales, FFS. The public completely blagged by Shalom and Boxer. We don't know how aware Shalom and Boxer were of the condition of Dave Allen, but yeah, I mean, he didn't look great on the scales and he didn't look great in the ring. And he put out a post on Instagram either yesterday or today where he's been quite open about that, said, apologized for his performance, very unhappy with it. He's going to consider his future. It was dire. I think you've got to criticise Fraser Clark a little bit as well. That faced with a Dave Allen who wasn't in great shape and wasn't, particularly ambitious in the fight, still let him hang around for quite a long time. I don't think all the shots were low, by the way, while we're on this subject. I think some were, but I don't think they all were. I think Dave smartly made the most of it once it became an issue. I think Fraser said something in the post-fight that was very interesting, where he said, Dave's obviously been keeping abreast of current affairs in boxing or something along those lines. So the whole controversy with Usyk and Dubois carried over a little bit.
Danny, do you think it was it not low in the sense it wasn't a low blow, or was it not low in the sense it wasn't technically low? What do you think?
Both. I mean, they weren't all low, is what I'm saying. Like, a couple of them were. There were some quite egregious ones mixed in. But I think every time he got hit around the body and the referee was taking a close look, Allen then showed out. Let's not forget he has trained alongside Usyk, so he's probably picked up a few tips. But yeah, I thought Fraser Clark could have done a lot better with the subpar Dave Allen compared to what we've seen in the past that was in front of him. But he is still learning. He is still adapting from the amateur to the pro game. So, I'm willing to give him a pass as he moves up the levels to an extent. But I just don't think, for what for me wasn't a great fight, I don't think Dave Allen should shoulder all of the blame. Kevin Worrell says, who's Eubank going to have as a trainer now? Such a shame as he looked happy and comfortable with Bomac. We don't know anything yet. Innocent till proven guilty, although I believe and we'll talk about Bomac in a minute, but I believe he is currently on remand and there's a court date set for October. So we'll have to see what happens with that. Never mind that, though. Who's Terence Crawford? I know he's gifted, but who's Terence Crawford going to go? He's been with Bomac his whole career. He's a pound-for-pound number one in the world. I'm more worried about Crawford. No offense to Eubank, but they've only been together 4 weeks. I'm much more worried about Crawford and maybe Bomac himself, because we don't know all the circumstances just yet. Hippie Hill says the Zone and Boxer have ruined British boxing. The quality of cards is so poor these days. I'm just going to give you what isn't necessarily a hot take, but is a take, Hippie Hill and everyone else watching. I don't think it's down to just the Zone and Boxer. I think it is the situation that we've got. And I was saying this to Andy Ayling in Warren's office earlier. In the past, 20, 30 years ago, we had maybe 2 major TV promoters in Mickey Duff and Frank Warren. And then as time's gone on, it's become the big 3, if you like. So more recently, we've had Warren, Box and Matchroom. Now we've got Wasserman as well with the Zone and Channel 5, and also the Misfits offshoot, although there's not as much demand on Journeyman, for example, on those shows. But now we've got 4 major TV promoters, and they're all competing for the same talent to an extent, about below the top level, below the main event. So they're all competing for the same kind of English title fighters, British title fighters, and journeymen. And that's always going to be an issue. That's always going to dilute the quality of each individual show. And not only that, not only have we got 4 TV promoters, but each of them are putting on more shows than they have in the past. So while in a sense British boxing's booming because we've probably got more shows than we've ever had before, it means the quality of each show is essentially going to lower. We can certainly complain about that, but there are systemic reasons behind it. It's not just a case of one promoter killing everything. Kevin Worrell said, yeah, agree. I said that earlier. Crawford's going to be affected. Anderson Silva says, at what point was Bomac arrested? How did he make it to the press conference? Was he bailed? No, he was arrested on Sunday. He was arrested the day after the fight when he was on his way back to the US. But yeah, let's move on to that. So I saw the news broke today. I saw it on social media and then I read the article in the Daily Mail just in time for me to ask Frank Warren and other people in Warren's office about it. And apparently, Bomac was detained and arrested at Manchester Airport, trying to get back to the US after the Eubank fight on Sunday, having been found to have a gun, a loaded gun, reportedly, with ammunition as well, like separate ammunition, in his case at the airport, which obviously raises so many questions, not least of which, how did he get in to the UK with it if he brought it with him? Did he, or did he get it while he was in the UK? Which raises a whole other set of questions. Latest I've heard is that he has been remanded in custody till a court date in October. Whether he stays in custody until then is open to doubt because we don't know what's going to happen between now and then. Axel Schultz, I said this earlier because I saw your comment earlier, Axel, but I'll read it out just so everyone can hear it because I thought it was one of the funnier takes. Can you confirm rumours that the gun was concealed in a McDonald's bag? It's not big or clever to insult someone because of their weight, but that was quite funny. Ayman, what was your first reaction when you saw the news about Bomac?
Yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, I do have a background in legal, although criminal isn't really my area of expertise or favor either. Wasn't really into criminal law. But when I first read the news, it was actually another reporter messaged me saying, "Have you read the news about Bomac?" And first of all, my heart dropped, and I thought, "Oh shit, has something happened to him in terms of medically? Has he gone into hospital for something?" You never know what's going on these days with people. So that was my first initial thought, and then I kind of
Is that
woke up.
because of his weight, Ayman?
For a multitude of reasons. So that's a wrestling fan here. I'll put it out there. And we had Bray Wyatt, who was also a heavy guy who unfortunately passed away too. So you never know with people in general and with heavier people too. So that was my first initial thought.
Anderson Silva just said maybe Bomac is an international gun runner for the Crips. And I've got to be honest, when I first saw it, I didn't read it properly. And I thought it said an international runner for crisps, which I thought was quite funny. But yeah, sorry, back to you. Back to more serious tone.
Yeah, more serious tone indeed. Yeah, then I read the news and saw that it was for possession, or allegedly possession anyway, at the airport. He was stopped and there was a weapon in what's believed to be his suitcase. It's a serious issue here, of course. Like in the UK, obviously the laws are completely different in America as to the UK. And in America, you can carry a weapon under certain circumstances, and over in the UK, we're categorically against them. And now, from my understanding of what's been reported out there, there are very scarce details around this, and we'll get the details as soon as they kind of drip fed through. But I believe it falls under Section 5(1) ABA of the Firearms Act. So, and those offences under that category carry a mandatory minimum sentence. So essentially here, with the details that we have and with what I've briefly looked under, Bomac might be looking at a 5-year minimum sentence here. Now, that as the details kind of come out, and if we get more, some things are represented a bit differently. The case can be argued where maybe under certain circumstances, you can have smaller kind of punishments handed out, which include the likes of community sentences and fines and things like that. But a real kind of a thing to look out for really is to whether he's granted bail or not, or whether that's argued, because that will kind of tell you the seriousness of the case and how the defense team are looking at it, and then also how the prosecuting team are looking at it. So if he's being granted bail or not is a real big indicator of how the case might go, at least how they're looking at it. So yeah, a real developing situation where it can really affect Bomac's career right now. He's currently under custody, so he's not on bail, so he can't work. And if he's kept in custody, he can't work, he can't train with his fighters, potentially not be allowed back in the country as well too. I believe this isn't 100% for certain here, but I believe he does have, and I'll double check and check this out. So I apologize in advance if it's not true, but I believe it's been said out there that he does have criminal convictions back over in the US as well too. So it's a very, very real, serious and developing situation for Bomac, who will have to plead his case in I believe in about 5 weeks' time in October. So we'll keep an eye on that and keep you abreast of the information. But a serious one for that team.
So I was just kind of like chuckling at some of the comments, and also Bomac goes out firing, which was my headline for this section, and realised that as I'm laughing on camera, Ayman was talking about mandatory sentences and so on. So that just should make it clear that I'm not laughing about the possibility of Bomac going inside for a long time. Although if he deserves it, that's a different matter. I still wouldn't laugh about it though. Big Dog says Bomac told Liam not to punch or he's getting shot. I mean, it would explain a lot about his performance on Saturday night, I suppose. Anderson De Silva, I've got a stutter all of a sudden. Anderson De Silva says this is seriously bad news for boxing in general, not good at all. Axel Schultz says, are you allowed to have gun in hand luggage on any plane? I mean, maybe if you're, I don't know, an air marshal, perhaps, but otherwise, no, I don't think so. Certainly not B.A. Baracus. You don't get on no plane anyway. Dell says, what about Nick Ball? It's kind of off topic, Dell. But I didn't ask Frank about him today. I will do next time I speak to him. I usually do. Anderson De Silva says, hope Bomac don't make a deal and blame Eubank. Snitches get stitches. I don't think he's going to shop Eubank to the feds, funnily enough. Kevin Worrell says, a gun with bullets, a lot more serious. Indeed. Dale says, I'm sure they'll say, oh, there was no fingerprints on the gun. It wasn't his. It was one of his mates. He goes free and a yes man gets a wad of cash to do time. I think someone's been watching too much Top Boy, but you never know. New series starts next week, I think, actually. The final series. Just thought I'd bring that up. Dudley O'Shaughnessy, former really good amateur boxer, is in it as well. The SUF says, wouldn't they just deport him for good? I mean, I think Ayman's probably more in tune with what the possible punishments are than anything else. Massive Coconut says, we need more Danny content, underrated AF in the boxing scene. Thanks, Massive Coconut.
Have you paid this guy?
He said something really nice early. He called me like a big hunk of sex appeal or something like that.
Yeah, you paid this guy.
I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, I am him. It's my alt account. Just typing Massive Coconut. No, it's probably, do you know who it might be? It might be Keith Fraser. Because his like Twitter handle is Big Cojones or something like that. So it might be him. If it is you, Keith, I really appreciate it, but I still haven't started your book yet, so I apologise. Not like me to pass up a freebie, but I'll have to get round to it. But yeah, big issues for Bomac at the moment, and not the sort of headline I expected to read on a Sunday following a career best performance, a lot of which was attributed to Bomac by a lot of commentators. That's kind of what I want to ask Ayman as well, while we're talking about Bomac. How much of Eubank's improved performance in the second Smith fight do you put down to him spending that 4 weeks with Bomac, and also Bomac's presence in the corner, keeping him on message and on tactics?
Yeah, so first of all, just on the point regarding Bomac as well, I'd just like to add, I think on the lighter side of things, Bomac can kind of maybe hope for a suspended sentence and obviously avoid prison at all. From my knowledge, doesn't have a criminal record in the UK, and court don't really like putting people in prison who don't have a criminal record in the UK. So, and there's not this situation that, although it's very serious, there's no actual violence involved. It's just a case of a firearm being found in possession at the court. So if he maybe argues on honest mistake and such, then maybe he gets found on the lighter side of any sentencing. But let's put that aside. And again, that's in lieu of the details out there, so we don't know the full details of the situation. But in terms of answering your question, Danny, how much can we attribute Eubank Jr.'s success to Bomac? We can attribute a portion to it, because the big thing about Chris Eubank Jr.'s career, really, and the big consternation and controversy about his career outside of the crash and the weight in the first fight, and this suspected Conor Benn fight, is him listening to the people around him and wanting to take in the knowledge of the people around him. And that's been, from a Chris Eubank Jr. perspective, is he's shunned the likes of Ronnie Davis or his father or Roy Jones Jr. or whoever it may be, that he doesn't want their knowledge. He's got to how far he's got to his way and wanting to do it his way. Now, for what it looked like for me in the corner is a trainer in Bomac giving him instructions in between rounds, and a fighter listening and affecting those instructions. Really, kind of, we need to speak to Chris and Bomac and ask if those were affected and applied properly. But if that is the case, and it seems to be the case, because Bomac, I think, said as much in his post-fight interviews, then this is a marked improvement for Chris in terms of affecting the game plan as a team, and then as a fighter too, who got his biggest win so far to date. So I think Bomac has to take some proportion, but also there was an admittance as well too, I think, pre-fight after the weigh-in, that Chris Eubank Jr. said, look, there's only so much Bomac can really do in those 4 weeks. I'll revert to typing, maybe kind of taking more of the credit for himself, or preemptively taking that credit for himself. But I feel, look, this pending Bomac being released and this case going in his favor, them two working together and the way that this fight went can only mean good for Chris Eubank Jr., who, look, I think potential is not the word we're using for Chris right now, but maximizing what he's got. And in terms of his fight style with Bomac, I think it could be a good journey with the two.
Massive Coconuts has denied being Keith Fraser. All right, Keith, I got you, mate. And he says, but stay away from Instagram DMs. It was Facebook. Not that that's the only thing I'd like to clarify about that situation, but now's not the time. Axel Schultz says, Bomac, not a British passport holder. UK government has no jurisdiction. Not sure that's completely true if he's possessing a gun on UK soil, but again, I'm no legal expert. Boxing and MMA Talk says, Eubank had a big weight cut from Benn fight to Smith. You could see he was a lot stronger on the weekend. Yep, very true. Cole McKay says, Eubank versus Benn, ram it. Which I think means, go to hell, get rid of it, that kind of thing. Dell says, issue is he has no license for the gun. If it was licensed, I assume he could get away with it on a technicality. I'm not sure that's true, because if it's illegal to possess it in the UK, even if you're licensed to own it in the US, I'm not sure that'd get him through it. But again, no Perry Mason here, no Ali McBeal, or someone more recent. I can't remember the name of the guy's character in Suits, but Comforting Liars says, boxing the most corrupt sport on earth by a mile. Never paid a PPV in my life and never will. No violence involved. Ha ha. If we get caught with a loaded gun, it's 5 years. Don't get caught then, Comforting Liars. We're not here to counsel you on your criminality. Big Dog says prosecution will just get all theoretical and say, what if he shot someone? Yeah, I mean, but that is a serious thing. Isn't that why the sentences for carrying knives are so high these days? It's because there is a knife crime epidemic, and it is the potential, the threat, rather than just actual, criminal acts. We've got the results of the poll through. Who wins, Eubank Jr. versus Benn? A whopping 79% in favour of Next Gen. Remember when he used to be called that? Chris Eubank Jr. Only 20% going for Conor Benn.
I wonder how the votes would have been reflected had this Liam Smith fight not happened. How we'd be looking at, because a lot of people writ off Chris Eubank Jr. after the first fight. I wonder how people would have voted, having not seen this rematch.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good point. Coming off that first defeat, the first time Eubank Jr. had ever been stopped, I mean, he looked pretty bad. It was a destructive defeat, and most people were picking Liam Smith to come back and win that rematch as well. Not to come back, rather, but to repeat and to win it. So, yeah, I imagine it would have been a much closer poll, if anything. But Conor Benn says he's willing to fight Eubank up at 160 pounds. Ahmed Salah says Eubank should be fighting the best at 160 instead of welterweight. I agree. But yeah, if Ben's willing to fight up at 160, gets rid of one of the major advantages he had in making Eubank cut those really difficult last couple of pounds. Yeah, I mean, I don't see... It's hard to see Benn winning it. Yes, he is a big puncher, but at welterweight, I don't know if he'll carry that up to middle. He won't be as fast up at middle, carrying that extra weight, unless he's planning to come in just over the welterweight limit. Then he'd give up a lot of size. Eubank's got pretty fast hands for a middleweight as well. He's going to be confident coming off that Smith win. It's hard to think of a particular area where you'd back Benn. Eubank's got a really good engine as well, durable, apart from that one fight against Liam Smith, which could perhaps now be classed as an aberration. I mean, if we look at the poll, right, so it's 80-20 in favour of Eubank. Ayman, do you give Conor Benn a more than 20% chance in that fight?
Yeah, I think I do. Again, he's got to make weight again, and any problems surrounding that. I think Chris has always kind of been someone who has stayed at a good weight. When you've seen him in pictures outside of the ring, he's not someone who's ballooned up and down after fights. So, but still, again, at a later age in his career, you still have to make those weights, and those things still take that out of you. So that's still a minor issue that you have to get through as well. Look, in terms of Conor Benn as a fighter, he's fast, he's explosive. He's shown himself to be able to carry that through for 12 rounds. I think the initial kind of thing would be really those first kind of 4 to 5 rounds, really, where Conor Benn will be most dangerous in a fight for Chris to navigate through. We've seen Chris can debate the elbow or not. Let's say for the moment, it wasn't an elbow. We've shown that Chris in this point in his career can be put in a position where he gets himself caught and can be seriously hurt in that fight. He's shown his heart in the point that he wants to fight on, maybe to his detriment in that case here. But he can be caught by something big. And does Conor Benn possess a big punch? He's shown that now in his recent last few fights. Well, people want to kind of point to outside factors to it, but forget that again. He's shown he's got a big punch here and can cause damage. So yeah, I definitely give Conor Benn more than a 20% chance. The other thing I want to offer to you, Danny, in return, and to the people in the chat too, is outside of a Liam Smith trilogy fight or a Conor Benn fight, what fight would you want to see Chris Eubank Jr. in that, one, makes money and two, makes sense? The fight I would offer to you and the people in the chat is Billy Joe Saunders, looking to return back to the ring, has history, has narrative, picks up lapsed fans who have dropped off from boxing from many years ago, and two big personalities who Chris Eubank Jr. will have a claim that he won the first fight or was going to win the first fight, as Billy Joe Saunders tailed off and towards the end of the fight. And Billy, being a big character, will say, I beat you, I can beat you again, let's go again. Big fight in the offing, I think.
Well, the answer is Zach Parker, of course. But before I get onto that, I want to just report two, on the surface, unconnected points. One is that Massive Coconuts has gone a little bit quiet in the chat. Another is that I received a text 3 minutes ago from Keith Fraser, funnily enough. I haven't heard from him for a couple of weeks. He says, "Hi, Danny. Hope you're well, matey. How do you like my book?" Now, I'm not saying anything. I'm not casting aspersions here, but coincidence? I think not. Massive Coconuts will be back on
Detective Danny Flexen.
I mean, he doesn't text me that often. That's all I'm going to say. I would like to see Eubank actually fight for a world title. I would like to see him against Charlo, for example, the one who's not fighting Canelo, the one who hasn't fought in seemingly ages. I'd like to see him against Jamal. Yeah, why not? That's a fight that's been talked about before. It's an interesting fight on paper. Could be in the US, in which case, he might have a chance of having Bomac in the corner. Unarmed, of course. Eubank will do all the firing in that one. And yeah, I'd quite like to see that. I'm trying to think who holds the belts. Janibek wouldn't be as big a sell as a Charlo fight, I don't think, but he has fought British opposition previously. Denzel Bentley, of course. They're trying to make maybe Hamza Shiraz against Janibek at some point. What about Eubank against one of those? And I think also, yeah, Billy Joe Saunders is a good shout, but we need to see him back, see what weight he comes back as, see how sharp he looks. Because when you take that long off, obviously Saunders, apart from that horrible injury against Canelo, didn't put loads of miles on the clock. But having been out for so long, I don't know how he's been living during his hiatus. He may not be able to get back to that talent level, that sharpness that he had before. It was a very close fight, obviously, the first time around. And Saunders had improved before his, I don't know, do we call it a retirement or long break, extended break? But yeah, so we'll have to see what sort of shape he's in. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely a sellable fight.
Who would you favour?
I favour Eubank at the moment, just through momentum and activity. I mean, Saunders, without seeing him, if Saunders comes back in a half-decent fight in a few months' time and looks amazing, then that could change. But the first fight, when they were both arguably, maybe not better fighters tactically and mentally, but physically, was very close. So, yeah, you'd have to back Eubank without having any visual evidence. Dell says Saunders needs to have a meaningful fight first. If he comes back in an immediate fight with Eubank, Eubank will get zero credit if he wins. Ahmed Seller says Eubank is not even fighting the best welterweight. Yeah, that's true, but obviously the Ben fight can be sold on the history of the dads and the legacy and so on. Eubank Charlo, then if he wins, bring on Ben with a title. Fucking huge, says Dell. Saunders isn't a bad option, says Jim, but not yet. Massive Coconut says, I should have signed it, Danny. Could pay your mortgage off selling it on eBay in a few years. Mate, I'd love you to, if you don't mind. I'm glad you realise I've got a mortgage and I'm not just renting. That's good for my status. Kevin Worrell says, not seen Saunders for ages. How's his weight? I mean, that's the big question. The rumours are is that he's going to come back around December time at light heavyweight. So not much above where he succeeded in the past. I'll believe it when I see it, I guess, is the answer to that. Ahmed Salah says, Eubank needs to go to 168 and fight Canelo/Benavidez. I mean, I'd quite like to see Canelo and Benavidez fight each other more than anything. And then maybe he targets the winner of that. I think Eubank against John Ryder is a really good fight.
Yeah,
Axel Schultz, Joe Ryder. Brilliant. Amalgamation of the two against one, perhaps. That would be on a Misfit show. Yeah, I think Eubank against John Ryder's a really good fight. Really entertaining as well, exciting, in the trenches. Eubank wins. He truly deserves a world title shot at super middle. It's a good comeback fight for Ryder as well after the defeat. I wouldn't mind seeing that at all. But selling-wise, it's big enough. It's bigger than the Zach Parker fight, for example. But it's nowhere near as big. And none of these fights are anywhere near as big financially, commercially, as Conor Benn. And that's why that fight will be there, regardless of drug issues, regardless if one suffers a defeat like Eubank did against Smith. It's still going to be there because everyone involved would make so much money.
I'm glad you've not raised the boxing fans' ire, and specifically Gail's ire, by mentioning Gennady Golovkin.
I assume Gail's dropped off. I don't know. I assume she's got into a fury and had to go and give herself a timeout.
Furiously thumbing down the...
Let us know, Gail. We want to know you're okay. Are you still there? Tell us.
But yeah, that Golovkin fight. Look, commercial sense here. Eubank Jr. has always kind of looked for and targeted the Golovkin fight. Golovkin, we don't know what he's doing right now, and there's rumors that he wants maybe one final fight over in Kazakhstan. I don't think that really makes much sense for Chris Eubank Jr. unless he really kind of wants to have Golovkin's name on his CV. And it would kind of be a bit of a shame, really, for Golovkin, who's, for me, been my favorite fighter for the last kind of however long he's been in boxing. His rise from 5, 6, 7, 8 years back to where he's kind of been now on the slide. To see him kind of, I don't know, against Chris Eubank Jr., faded version of him, and Chris picking up the win. Not that I would begrudge him the win, but picking up the win against this version of Gennady Golovkin and parading that as a trophy, which isn't as shiny as it once could have been.
I just want to butt in for a second, if that's okay. Gail's okay. She's in the chat. And she's returned some pertinent information as well. Gail, I never doubted you. She says, for UK viewers, it is only for UK viewers, Gail. It is legal in the US to legally travel with a firearm and ammo. It must be in a hard-sided locked case in checked luggage per the TSA. But the question then there is, can you then travel on international flights with it? Because when he goes through security in the US, presumably he'd have to present his boarding pass, which shows that he's traveling overseas. And if the country you're traveling into doesn't allow firearms possession, surely they would have stopped him in the US. So I'm still not entirely clear. Gail, maybe you can follow up with another chat just to correct me. And she says, it takes more than that to wave me off. Eubank had the chance to fight Golovkin in 2016 and took a pass. Gail, that's incredibly unfair. There was a pen shortage at the time, I believe, here in the UK, and Eubank could not locate one in the necessary time frame. Eubank lost his pen when he had a chance to fight Golovkin. That's Ahmed Salah. Great minds think alike. Eubank should get a title fight, says Dell. People are fickle. 36 fights and lost super middleweight to Groves. Saunders lost, which is debatable, and then Smith after a huge weight drop. He deserves more credit. That's an interesting point Dell raises there, Ayman. Do you think we underrate Chris Eubank Jr., at least partly because of his personality?
Yeah, look, I think he's certainly underrated to a degree, and I think a lot of that comes through the fact that he has that surname. And for fighters who are sons or daughters of greats, as far as he goes, I think he's had one of the better careers for one of those junior fighters. I think to a degree, it depends how you look at it. Did he ever have the potential to claim a world title? He claimed an IBO world title, whether you're saying it's the 5-belt era, as some fighters are now saying. I disagree, and the IBO world title can't be factored as such. But did he have the potential to win a proper world title? But I'd say he did. Has he gone the route down to get himself a position to be mandatory ordered for a belt? No. Has he really ever wanted that? Maybe not. So, we can say we're fickle, but he's never really pursued that route. And you have to do that. I know that in boxing as well, there's so many belts, and you can, finagle yourself through politics and such to get a world title through other means, and you don't necessarily have to get yourself ordered to a position. But he's never really been in that position. So I think that plays a factor as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. Dell says underrated because of his dad and his arrogance. It's not just his dad, Dell. You know, Eubank Jr. has shown a different side to his personality in recent times, particularly since losing, and also after the unsavoury comments that were exchanged at the pre-fight press conference from the first fight. But previous to that, he did have a certain persona that wasn't completely unlike his father's. You know, he was quite cold, he was quite arrogant, he was quite cocky. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think it helps to sell and to make you a bigger star, particularly on TV. You know, Eubank's never been a massive junior, has never been a massive ticket seller, but he's always been a big TV and pay-per-view attraction. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But I think as time's gone on, he has warmed up. He's become warmer, and I think the public, as a result, have warmed to him. And fair play to him, because these could be maybe not his physical prime, maybe he's past that slightly, I don't know. But these could be the most commercially viable, attractive years of his career. Gail says, good question. If Bomac was on a private aircraft, there may have been no one to stop him taking a firearm in luggage. If Bomac does this regularly, it might not have occurred to him to check UK law. That's a very good point, Gail. I appreciate your insight. I think, you know, obviously ignorance is no excuse, as the old saying goes. However, that would explain why he did it. Because most people look at this and say, oh, he's so stupid. Why would you do that? That's an idiotic move to make. And I saw Ayman was telling me earlier, someone had said on social media that Bomac had an attempted mugging in the UK in a past visit, which may have meant that he felt the need to take extra precautions. Again, none of this justifies the act, but it does explain why he might have done something that on the surface seems foolish. So, yeah, it's an interesting one. Axel Schultz says, what do you think of excuses post-fight? Eubank had a bad year leading up to Liam Lawson's hit with the elbow. He got massive stick from fans and peers. Liam blames weight and everyone's sympathetic. Yeah, I think Liam has had more public affection over the years, which helps. But also, I think it was demonstrative, wasn't it? You know, when you saw the first fight, most people, including Eubank himself, has talked up this narrative that he won the first 3 rounds. So it's harder to make excuses about having a bad year, being hit with the elbow and the weight and everything else, when for all intents and purposes, it seemed like a competitive fight until the end. It's easier to believe Liam with the weight cut and think that was a factor in Eubank's victory because he looked absolutely flat, and it was a far cry from the Liam Smith we've seen before. Even against Canelo, where he was, you know, pretty much dominated in that fight as well, he threw a lot more punches, he came forward a lot more, and he took a lot more. So, you know, it's clearly a different Liam Smith. You know, whether he deserves sympathy or not is a different question, but it clearly wasn't the Liam Smith of old. Dell says maybe the loss of his brother has given him another calling. He's been more humble. I think it did affect him deeply. Whenever I've spoken to him about it, and it hasn't been often because it's not the sort of thing you want to raise, particularly, he has seemed very moved by his brother's passing. He obviously wore his name on the waistband of his shorts as well. So I think that is a factor. Jim says, Eubank is a nice lad, gets treated like muck. Not by everyone. Not by seconds out. No, bias out. Brown nosing out. Bullshit out. Seconds out. Sorry, just had to push that in. The Suff says, guys, what happened at the post-fight press conference? A YouTube video somewhere showed a brief ruckus towards the end of that conference with Liam looking to get involved. Can you comment? I can comment to an extent. There was a bit of argy-bargy, I guess is the technical term, between both sets of teams. It never got, you know, properly physical at any point. And we were asked by the promoters of the show if we could remove the video. It was our video that went up, just because it created the wrong impression of what was otherwise a particularly mostly positive event. And as we've got a good relationship with them, and we didn't feel the video was doing anything particularly for us as a channel, we'd already kind of done our traffic on it anyway. We were happy to remove it. But there was nothing beyond that. Anyone that got to see the video before it was removed or made private knows that there was nothing particularly offensive in there. Jim says, how do you feel about the Smith team shenanigans pre-fight, the post-fight aggro at the presser, the sore loser effect, and the general bad vibes? I mean, that's a lot of questions there. I think Liam Smith got the most celebrated victory of his career against Eubank in the first fight, and then to get dominated so clearly in the second one, and to know that it didn't have to be that way because, you know, you've had an injury in camp, which is unfortunate. Then you've had a short deadline to make the Eubank rematch, and you've had to do it because financially it'd be crazy not to. And then you've lost to someone you feel that on your best day you have beaten and could beat again. That's tough to take. I mean, I'd be resentful in that situation. I think most people would. Things to do in Guernsey Channel Island says, I don't want to see Ben and JR as Ben is on the juice and Eddie is trying to pay the board off. We don't endorse that. We're not saying that's true in any way. Del says, let's not forget in the Sky build-up video to the fight behind the ropes or something, Liam's brother even says it was the elbow. I think Liam got to a point where he said an elbow may have gone in, but he doesn't believe it was the pivotal factor in the fight. And I think I'd probably go along with that. But whether you think Eubank was weakened particularly and less punch resistant because of the weight cut, that's a different story. But I still haven't had a reasonable explanation why he decided to go down or try to go down once the fight with Ben was called off, why he tried to go down to 158 or whatever it was. Sunset asks, who is the owner of Seconds Out? Is it Radio Raheem? No. Radio Raheem is a lot of things, all positive and all effective, but he's not the owner of Seconds Out. He works for Seconds Out, of course, pretty much exclusively in the boxing scene. But the owner of Seconds Out is a lovely gentleman named Robert Waterman. I have to say he's lovely because he pays both mine and Ayman's salaries. But no, he is a good guy. And if you're particularly eagle-eyed, you will have seen him not seen him, but heard him do some interviews on Seconds Out in the past, notably with Dimitri Salita and Don Charles, who he's close friends with. Rob's a great guy. He won't want too much publicity. That's not the sort of person he is. But he used to promote a bit of boxing back in the day alongside Jim Evans, the dearly missed Jim Evans, under the Evans-Waterman banner, and was involved with shows that were broadcast on Eurosport, for example. So he's something of a YouTube pioneer. Seconds Out, I believe, was actually launched before IFL, for example, but just didn't really achieve the success it has in recent years early on. But yeah, Rob, something of a YouTube pioneer and a true boxing man through and through. So that's enough brown nosing from a channel that says brown nosing out. Massive Coconut says he's the owner. Keith, you're a valued freelancer. You are not the owner. The stuff says, did Eubank Jr. ever give Liam credit for the initial loss in the end? Did he, Ayman? I can't remember.
No, not really. Eubank really kind of just alluded to, you hit me with that shot and you did what you did, what you did, alluding to the elbow. He never said, he just said, oh, you had to do what you did, you got away with it, that sort of stuff. He never really fully gave him the credit. And just this point on, being sympathetic towards Liam Smith, I think, not that people aren't sympathetic towards Chris Eubank Jr., but Chris Eubank Jr. also is a promoter, not just as much, but quite a lot of him is a promoter as well as being a fighter too. So when you hear the stuff from Chris Eubank Jr. and him saying this, that, and the other about him as a fighter and what he's going to do, it kind of muddies how you think about him and give him less sympathy when he's coming up with grandiose statements and when he's on the end of a knockout that happened against Liam Smith, you don't really give him that sympathy. Whereas the Smiths, their characters, and specifically Liam as well too, talking about him in this circumstance, he's very much a straight talking person. With Liam, you see, what you get what you get, and I don't take this as an excuse from Liam. I see it as Liam providing a reason as to why he was flat in his performance. You can say it's an excuse if you want, but I think Liam's providing a reason, not taking actually any of the credibility away from Eubank Jr. from beating him, but just saying to a point that, look, you beat me, sure, fair and square on the night, but it wasn't quite the full version of me. I think that's not an excuse for me. That's just kind of giving you colour to the black and white here.
Kevin Worrell says, what's happened to Michelle Joy Phelps' channel? She's on Fight Hub now. I think someone lower down in the chat has said she's also on OnlyFans, which was going to be my joke, so thanks for stealing that. But no, Michelle, who's a great friend of the channel, is doing some work for Fight Hub. I don't think she's with them exclusively. I'm not sure what's happening with Behind the Gloves, though. For a little while, it was carrying on without her. I saw some stuff go up, but I'm not sure what's happened since then. Probably best asking her on one of her social media channels, not OnlyFans. I'm not recommending or endorsing OnlyFans. Axel Schultz says, do you know of any boards that recognise VADA? The BBBFC supposedly don't, so what's the point? It seems like only WBC care about failed VADA tests and they'll give fighters excuses. I don't know about the excuses thing, but the WBC run the clean boxing program, which is in association with VADA. So it makes sense that anyone who fails a VADA test that's in the WBC top 15, because you have to enroll in the CBP to be part of their top 15 rankings at any weight, it makes sense that the WBC would value those VADA tests and act on the results. But I believe most of the commissions in the US, the state commissions, do recognise VADA, because for the most part, any fighters that have VADA testing for a fight in Texas, Nevada, New York, California, etc., VADA are only the testing agency. They don't impose penalties. That's not what they're there for. But then it goes back to the governing body, whether that's the state commission or in our case, the BBBFC, who work with UCAD predominantly. It's then up to them to make any judgments and exact any penalties on the fighter involved. So I think VADA is useful. I think the biggest problem is that VADA is expensive because it's a much more not elaborate, but more they test for more things basically than UCAD or WADA. So I think it's more expensive. They're an independent body, and someone's got to pay for the testing. Now, if you're in the WBC top 15, you enroll in the CVP, the WBC will pay for it. But if you're not, and you're just in a big fight in the US, for example, then the promoter will have to pay or the fighter will have to pay. And it's a big expense, and that's why we don't see VADA doing as much or as many fights perhaps as we'd like. And that's the biggest thing that always comes up. And we could do a whole other show on drug testing protocol. And because we see a lot of people in comments say, we need testing for every fight, 24/7, 365. Yeah, but that's a huge bill that comes with that. And there's been no decision as yet on who and how it would be paid for. Sunset says, will Gabriel Montoya be making another appearance with Danny again soon? Yeah, I hope so. I mean, so far they seem to have been based around a development in the Conor Benn case, and we've done 3. So it'd be interesting to see the results of the UCAD and BBBFC appeal, and then maybe go from there. But yeah, I hope so. And maybe we shouldn't just have him on about the Conor Benn stuff anyway, because he's a very insightful and gifted journalist in his own right. Sunset also says, would you have Victor Conte on, or would that risk damaging relations with Eddie Matchroom? Mate, we have Thomas Hauser on, so I don't think you need to worry about that. And I don't know how great relations are with Eddie anyway. I don't think he loves us particularly, so I'm not worried about that. Talking of Victor Conte, I saw the Netflix documentary, the Untold series on Netflix. Absolutely amazing sports documentaries, I've got to say, first of all. But there's an episode on Conte and the whole scandal, the Balco scandal. He's a big part of it, and he gets to tell his side of the story, but you hear the law enforcement side as well. Absolutely amazing. Highly, highly recommend it. And yes, of course, we would have Victor Conte on. He's more than welcome. The stuff says, guys, just wanted to say, awesome channel, awesome insights and interviews. Keep up the great work. Much love and respect. I just want to throw that back at the fans and the viewers of this live show, because we've been on for over an hour now. And this is our, 4th episode or 5th episode. And I was going to kind of cap it about 40 minutes today, because I find we run out of things to talk about. But because of you guys, not just staying on and watching, but also contributing with your chats and your questions, whether they be kind of light-hearted and fun, or whether they be serious on the topic we're talking about, you guys are the ones who keep us going. You make this show what it is. We always wanted to launch a show that was more interactive than anything else on Boxing YouTube, and you guys have really helped us to do that, and long may it continue. So appreciate the thanks and the respect from the staff, but right back at you guys. Let's keep it going.
Just keep the likes up. Hit the like button.
Yeah, like, comment, subscribe, with the emphasis on the like at the moment. Alessandra Berlusconi, that's the person who ruined my Michelle Joy Phelps crack, said, oh, wrong choice of words there. I enjoyed Frank Warren calling Thomas Hauser Shithauser. Did he? Don't remember that, but yeah. I wonder if he came up with that on his own. Was it on Twitter? that could tell us. Daryl1967 says, how's it massive? Because they're both dad's fault. They have done nothing in the sport. Massive was Eddie Hearn's comment, not mine. Dell says, the word on the street is Michelle is dyslexic. No, I'm not reading that. I once did an interview with Tyan Booth many years ago before he became completely cancelled, as he has been, I think, recently. And he made a few cracks about Michelle Phelps that didn't go down too well with her or members of the audience. So, yeah, I'm once bitten, twice shy. Name of my sex tape.
Perhaps. It is a massive fight, though. It is massive. It's one of those fights that both, a fight is big when you see a fighter or promoter, whatever, on mainstream TV, on Good Morning Britain, or whatever that BBC version is, or whatever ITV version is. When a fighter appears on those channels, that's when it crosses over into the mainstream, and it's massive. of course, you factor in the fact that both fighters have famous fighting fathers, and that picks up the lapsed fans who remember their fighting fathers. You add those two personalities into the mix as well, as long as, of course, Chris Eubank Sr. is of right fit mind at the moment. But put that aside, and let's say he is. You add those two personalities in the mix, and that makes a concoction which sells to people. I remember when the fight was initially being touted as going ahead. You saw it on the back of newspapers and things. So DAZN were putting in a massive amount of money to get this advertised outside of what they would love to have been on Sky Sports News and things, which is their rivals, of course, with Sky and Boxer. So they can't get that paid purchase time. But outside of that, they can, and they can cross over into the mainstream with that fight, which makes that fight huge if they can get it over the line.
Massive Coconut says, how do we like? You just click the thumbs up. Jim says, do you agree that people think Ben is some working class hero because of his accent and they dislike Eubank because his dad was arrogant in the 90s? First of all, I just want to say, right, so I was trying to take a bit of a break from boxing yesterday on my day off, one of my days off. And I was took my son to the local park in Rochester. And I overheard these guys talking about Eubank Ben. And one of them was an Australian chap. And he said, not many people realise, but Conor Benn spent most of his childhood in Australia and he started boxing over there. And the other guy he was speaking to seemed more of a Eubank fan. He was talking about Eubank Smith. He seemed very interested. So I'm not quite sure where Conor Benn's accent comes from. That was the point I'm trying to get to, because he didn't spend most of his life, unlike his famous father, in East London. And unlike me as well, I grew up in East London. First fight I ever saw live was Ben McClellan. I think I've probably mentioned that before. So I'm not sure where that accent actually comes from and how much of it's authentic. Don't hit me, Connor. Don't hit me on the apples and pears. Oh dear. But yeah, so I don't think it's that. I don't think people think Ben's some working class hero necessarily. He's been very clear that he was brought up in privilege in Australia and in Spain. And he's been brought up as the son of someone with a hell of a lot of money, Nigel Benn, and a hero in his own right. So I don't think it's that. I think people like Ben because he's a good talker, he's good looking guy, he's unbeaten, he's exciting to watch in the ring. He does massive numbers on socials, Eddie Hearn will tell you. So I think a lot plays into it. And then, as I said earlier, I don't think they dislike Eubank Jr. purely because of his dad's personality in the old days. Because a lot of people that dislike Eubank are boxing fans of today, are younger, so they wouldn't know that much about his dad necessarily. I think it's because Eubank was cold and cocky at the start of his career, and I think that's only just now starting to change in the public perception. Kevin Worrell says, what did you think of Adam co-main event against the Ukrainian? I thought it was a good step up for him, genuine step up. It's a good question, actually, because, again, I spoke to Andy Ayling about this as well, all off camera, of course. And he wasn't particularly impressed with Azim. I thought it was a good opponent. I thought it was the sort of opponent he should fight at this stage of his career to make him better. But he's a non-puncher. Looking at his record, the guy he fought, the Ukrainian, Fanian.
Yeah.
And he said afterwards, Adam, in his post-fight interview on Sky, yeah, I really believe in my chin. I took some shots, but now I've got a great chin. Comments like that would carry more credibility if you'd fought a massive puncher, especially in that fight that you just had. Where does that confidence in the chin come from? Maybe it's sparring people in the gym. I hear his brother, for example. I'm sure he sparred loads as a big puncher. So maybe that is, he's got a reason to have great belief in his chin. But fights like this don't prove it. I think from a technical perspective, it was a good step up. I think Fanian posed him a number of problems and he came through well, but it wasn't the most exciting display. He did still seem a bit stiff at times. Perhaps doesn't throw enough combinations, certainly for my liking. Kind of aims for single counters instead. But, overall, you've got to give him a passing grade, I think. What did you think of him, Ayman?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, these fights keep stepping up for Adam Azim, who's still very, very young, can't fight for a British title right now. So they're going this route to maybe go past that British title level and fight for the European level. So he can't take those steps. So they have to manufacture some in between. And I thought it was a good display from Adam Azim, who looked like you mentioned, maybe was guilty of loading up and trying to really kind of create a flashy highlight reel knockout on what was his biggest stage today. I think that's probably what he's guilty of there, really, loading up on those punches. And you can forgive someone who of that age and of the rise, a stock that we're believed that he has to want to create those moments. So I think maybe it just needs that bit of grounding, a bit further grounding under McGuigan to fashion that thinking out of him, maybe kind of look to break down his opponent Fanyan. But look, I thought, maybe had he not had the fights he had previously, he could have come under a cropper against Fanyan, who does have a bit about him. But I think, look, for prospects-wise, when it comes to prospects in this country, we don't have too many really who actually might live up to what their expectation is or what's been talked around about. And I think Adam Mazin does have that potential here. So keeping an eye on him. But yeah, good to see that he didn't falter under this stage. Maybe they might give him. Maybe there was a bit of a misstep here in the sense, actually, because of the opportunity that was there being co-main to a box office event at Liam Smith as Chris Eubank Jr. too. Maybe they should have kind of given him a softer touch to create that knockout, to then have him fight Fanyan on another bill, which was what it's essentially supposed to be in the first place. So there was maybe a bit of a rock and a hard place too for Boxer as well there.
And Axel Schultz says, with the quality of boxing on UK TV falling, I agree, and prices increasing, I mean, that's beyond doubt. Do you think if fans had more say on who's on the card, it could work? I'm not paying my subs to see Campbell Hatton / Naz's son so late in the card. I don't think it would make a difference, no. I don't think they're putting people on there thinking that fans aren't going to want to watch them. You know, they're there to make money and to get as many viewers as possible. So they're going to try and make the most of what they've got. I think, as I said earlier, the problem is that there's too many TV promoters with too big a stables putting on too many shows. And I don't want to be the one, that guy complaining about too much boxing. But the fact is that as long as we have this many shows from this many promoters all on TV, so all expected to be a certain quality, they've got to share out, a finite amount of talent. That's just the way it is. That's why it's good for some of the mid-level fighters who are getting to appear on lots of different promoter shows and they're competing with each other, so wages will go up. Great for the boxers in that sense, but we're not going to see the biggest fights. It's the same when PBC first kind of broke onto the scene in the US, and you had PBC, Top Rank, and Golden Boy, whereas previously maybe it had been two major broadcaster-promoter relationships, and then it became three. We had that issue where they weren't fighting each other. The other side of the street became a key phrase. And I think we're experiencing that to a lesser extent now in the UK. And unless one of those promoters fails and drops out of their TV contract, I think it will be that way for quite some time to come. But I don't want to end on a sad note. So Dell says, Michaela Mayer is decent. Natasha Jonas fight will be good. Michaela wins. A previous fight on Eddie's card, she was robbed of the victory. Mayer Jonas, very good fight. Would like to see it. But I think we're just about wrapped up. Ayman, any closing remarks for our loyal fan base?
Yeah, once again, I appreciate you joining in and offering and softening your stance on Danny as well. Danny, you were getting pelters in the first few weeks. Now you've turned the corner and you're really kind of taken on this big baby face run here now. Hopefully it continues. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for hitting the like, subscribe, and comment button. Make sure to keep tuned to Seconds Out. The one thing I want to mention here is a lot of talk about Eubank and Ben's demeanor, and Ben kind of mimics that kind of flash aggression, that flash angry demeanor that his dad had during his fight career. But with Chris Eubank Jr., he kind of has that little bit of arrogance about him that his dad does, just in his own separate way. But what I think will happen, and specifically on Eubank Jr., because he's heading towards the end of his career as a fighter, there was that lovely moment where James DeGale, who also wasn't really very, very well liked during his career I don't think he said anything really egregious, but he just kind of always played the heel and never really had the full backing of fans in kind of like a positive way. But when he finally retired and they put him on the big screen on Sky Sports, and everyone sort of started cheering for James, and James was perplexed. He was surprised. He was like, who were they cheering for? He looked at the camera and saw his own face, and he pointed at himself like, me. And I think he rose and kind of took the adulation of the crowd, who then roared even further for James. And I think that's what's happening with Chris, and will eventually happen when Chris finally retires. Hopefully he'll have picked up a world title along that way, a legitimate one, and a load of money too. He'll get the adulation of the fans for providing big box office nights that he has done.
And Daryl 1967, what about Bomac getting caught with the shooter? I'm afraid, Daryl, mate, you're going to have a look back at the playback, because we have discussed that at length. Probably about 15 minutes ago, we rounded that topic off. But I'm sure you'll enjoy it on the playback, as will many other people. We'll be back next Monday, hopefully at 5 p.m. once again, although there's rumours of a press conference next Monday, which I can say no more about. So we shall see, but definitely Monday, whatever time it turns out to be. Thank you all for your continued support. As Ayman always says, please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And we will see you all again next week.